Glad to see you all here today. I was going to announce that we are never, ever, ever again having anything on a Saturday night because apparently people think they don't have to come to church the next morning. But really, honestly, when you think about it, I remember when this was a really good turnout for this church. So things are looking up, everybody. Glad to see you all here today. Most of them, I know they got stuff going on, just, unusual, random things happen this time of year. It's a new year. People are involved in their little clubs and activities. They're still with us in spirit here. Just because they're gone doesn't mean they're out of the family. People are just busy these days. Amen? Amen. And in the middle of all of that busyness, I am here to tell you that God has not forgotten you, and that God loves you, and that love is alive, and this dreary, overcast day. And I myself, I grew up being told, work is sacred where I come from. And so the moment you act like you just aren't in the mood to work today, you're open to all kinds of ridicule and just, well, what's wrong with you? What's all this? And so having an overcast day was never an excuse. We went out, in fact, a day like this would be great to mow lawns, right? Because it's not quite so hot. But now that I kind of do a different sort of work, I find myself to be more affected with less adrenaline in my veins, more affected by the fact that, it's overcast. Kind of looks like it's early morning or late evening all day. Oh, what a dreary thing. Oh, I think I'll go ahead and let it get me down. Oh, no. So on a dreary, overcast day, not to mention we live in a dreary, overcast world. There's not a lot of great things going on. You try to turn on and watch some classic TV shows on MeTV, and what do they got? They got the impeachment trial going on. That's not what the guide on your TV says, but by golly, that's what they, you thought you were going to watch Hogan's Heroes, and there's Nancy Pelosi's ugly face up there, or whoever else, because none of the Republicans are very good looking either, so whatever. And it's just run. Iowa caucus this and primaries that, and we hate Trump and we love Trump and we're not sure about Trump. You turn all this on, and not to mention that's what our news media lets us see, because they don't even tell us about all the people that died around the world today. There are genocides, there are bombings, there are things that happen in other parts of the world, and our news media is too busy covering Kardashian trends or whatever the case may be, and we don't even know about it. But it's an awful, terrible world to live in. And so you show up, you're in a good mood, things are going well in your life, and I don't know if you've ever done this. Hey, what's going on, man? How are you doing? That person just meets you with that cold response of, maybe they don't say it out loud, but they're thinking, man, what's wrong with you? Why are you so happy? This happens sometimes, right? Sometimes I feel like this happens every time I get up to preach, because it is a dark and dreary world that we live in. And some Christians allow the darkness and the dreariness of the world to get them down. And some Christians are religiously opposed to letting the darkness and the dreariness of the world get them down. And your one person, okay, maybe not the only, but your one person here is Jerry Lockwood, right? You're in a bad mood. He might even shoo you out. I don't know. Like, you got no right. I know I can pick on Jerry, so I'll try not to wear out my welcome with that. Yeah, well, that helps. That certainly helps to keep the positive going in you. But so what am I trying to build up to today? What am I trying to introduce? I've just kind of rambled on for a little bit. What I'm trying to, I don't want you to think that you need to be positive just for positive's sake. Okay? There's plenty of positive thinking gurus out there. There's plenty of even people claiming to be Christian preachers on television and radio saying, you know what, if you would just look on the bright side of life, that's your Carter family, philosophy. Just keep on the sunny side of life, and there. I got a reference in for everybody 50 and above. And just keep on the sunny side of life. Just don't go into that darkness. Don't let that depression get a hold of you. And there's a lot of value in that. I don't want you to hear me say that's bad. There's a lot of value in that. In fact, I'm an analytical type of person but just by my nature, I don't get that excited about things. And so, I might, if I had been raised differently in other things, maybe I would be a little prone to a little bit of depression and just not a whole lot of excitement about my life. But the point I would like to make to you today is that you don't have to look on the positive side of life or intentionally fight to get to be more positive. I'm here to tell you today that if you know God and you know Jesus and you believe the Bible, you already have everything in the world to be positive about, because for us, it's a sunshiny, positive world, even when the clouds cover the sun, even when the darkness, like the old song says, when darkness seems to hide your face, I rest in His unchanging grace. And so, not because we are positive thinkers and we force ourselves to, but because we have a good outlook, whether we are reminded of it or not. We have come out of the Christmas season recently. We were singing this morning, Love Lifted Me, and I'm a music guy, you know me, and I don't just love music, I love lyrics and the poetry behind there, and I'm just thinking, how many people sitting in the pew today, as we read the lyrics there, and music's good, whether it's the old hymns like that, or it's the newer songs. I love some of both of them, and other ones, I can do without. But, to sing over and over, love lifted me, love lifted me. And I just thought, I wonder how many people in the congregation today are feeling that. Love lifted me. Things were bad. Things are still bad sometimes, but love lifts me, and love is around. We're coming up on Valentine's Day. We're going to celebrate love, or at least what the outside world calls it, maybe. I don't know. And how many people are sitting there thinking, love lifted me? I don't believe in love anymore, Where's the love for me? Where's not even just the romantic love? What about my parents who have not done right by me? What about the relationships, the broken relationships that I have? And thinking about that reminded me of a Christmas song. I've always appreciated Christmas songs that you don't hear 100 times on the radio. So I like the classics. I like Angels We Have Heard on High. But one of the ones that you don't hear all that often is I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. And I've tried to play it on guitar, and there's a reason you don't hear it very often. It's pretty complicated, chords-wise and all that kind of stuff. But just a little backstory about it. It was written during and about the Civil War. In fact, I believe it's Ralph Waldo Emerson. If you look at the bottom of the page in the hymnal, it's like, wait a minute, what's this poet that I learned about in school doing in the hymnal? And he was just upset that his world that he lived in was torn apart by not just war, but war here. In the place that was, we still call it the greatest place on earth, and yet it was ripped apart, families ripped apart by war, and he just didn't see why American had to be fighting American. His world was turned upside down. And as the song goes, like, you sing only the first couple of verses and you're still depressed, The song doesn't get to the good news. It tries to remind you every chorus, but, I'm sorry, there isn't a chorus. But you get to like verses 3 or 4 or something, and finally the bells are ringing, the church bells, and the bell has been associated with Christianity since like the 3rd century. That's how you start a church meeting. That's before PAs, before public announcement, before watches, before everyone knew to be there at 11 or 11:05 or whatever time it is we start. You would hear the bell, you would hear the church bell for miles and miles, and you would come and you would gather. And so he's saying, the world is dark, the world is terrible, I'm so sick of the world, God's forgotten us, God doesn't love us anymore. And yet, through all of that, he hears the church bell ringing, and all of the message that comes with the church and God's people, that Jesus came, died on the cross, set you free from your sin, defeated death, hell, and the grave, beat up the devil real good, and that we can be free from our own selfishness. We can be free from the effects of our sin, all the bad things that we deserve to have happen to us. God was willing to free us from that and pay a very high price doing so, the ultimate price. And all of that message of hope and love. It just comes ringing through the air with that bell, because he already knows all of it, so the bell reminds him of it. And he says, it doesn't matter how bad the world gets, that church bell just keeps ringing and keeps reminding me that behind the surface of the terribleness, it's still true. Just like when the clouds are in the sky blocking your view of the sun, it does not mean the sun has stopped shining. It is still shining. It's just been covered up. You can't see it right now, but by faith, you know that that sun is still behind those clouds. And by faith, we know that God is still at work, even when it seems dark. The children of Israel, God's own people, were in a dark time, and God sent His Son. They had been sent into exile over 500 years before. They had come out of exile only 70 years after that, which is pretty remarkable. They should have been absorbed into Babylonian society. They should have lost their Jewish ways. They should have began worshiping all the pagan gods, and we would have never heard from them again. But they lasted 70 years, and then King Cyrus said, you can go home, you can rebuild your city of Jerusalem, you can rebuild your temple, please worship your God, make sure He's happy with the Persian Empire, and do your own little thing. We don't care. But they never got to rule themselves again. They never really got to see all of the benefits that God had promised. God had promised, I'm going to rule the world with Jerusalem as my capital. Your little Israelite empire is going to be glorious again. And all the nations of the earth will want to come to Jerusalem and worship the one true God at the temple. You won't even have to turn to your neighbor and say, know the Lord. This is in Isaiah and in, I believe, Micah or Malachi. I get the two confused sometimes. But it's almost the same passage, word for word. No one will have to turn to his neighbor and say, know the Lord, because your neighbor will already know the Lord. There is coming a glorious utopia. A God utopia. So they came back and they rebuilt the temple and they rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem and they had their city and they had their temple. They didn't have the Ark of the Covenant. They had to argue over who exactly is in the priestly family should be doing all the sacrifices. They're still ruled by a foreign power. That foreign power changed. The Persian Empire got taken over by the Greeks. The Greeks got taken over by the Romans. 500 years later, God's promises are kind of, sort of fulfilled, but not really. It doesn't sound like the glorious return to the golden age of David and Solomon that we've been promised. But God has been promising a leader who would come. In fact, all the way back to the story of Adam and Eve, God has promised that someone from the seed of the woman would come, and all of this problem, all of this sin and selfishness we learned in Sunday school class this morning in James, in our Sunday school class with the youth, that why do you have fights and quarrels among you? Your own selfishness. So if that's at the root of all of the fights and quarrels and things, it all started with that snake in the garden. But God promised that someday the seed of the woman was going to come and He was going to crush the head of that serpent. And actually, there's another Old Testament story I would like to draw your attention to. Long after Adam and Eve, long after Abraham, but long before Moses. Long before God met with Moses on Mount Sinai. Long before Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. Long before Jacob even had 12 sons that were going to become the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob was a young man who had tricked his father and his brother, and he was on the run for his life. He was not living a Christian life. Can you imagine living in a family where mom and one brother tricked dad and the other brother? Maybe some of you have experienced that. Maybe there's been bad blood. I don't know. But it doesn't sound like a very Christian family to me. But Jacob had to flee for his life. He was safe at home as long as his father was still alive. But when his father died, he said, "Oh man, my brother Esau is going to get back at me. This is his chance. Out of respect for Dad, he had not killed me yet. Now he's in charge and he can kill me." And he fled. He went on a journey to go see his relatives and things that he had in Haran, in Mesopotamia. And on his way, you just really get the impression that he had left with the clothes on his back. He was on the run. Nothing even for a pillow but a stone that he found out there in the desert. And as he lay his head, that stone, and probably fell asleep from pure exhaustion, because stones don't make good pillows. In a dream, he saw a ladder that stretched from the point where he was all the way up into heaven, and angels were going up and down the ladder. Now, I've always pictured angels with wings, so angels with wings climbing this ladder has always been a little bit of a funny thing. Why don't they just fly, But angels don't always have wings in the Bible. Most of the time, they just look like a regular person. And so, to get from heaven to earth and do all the things that they need to, there is a ladder for them to come up and down on. And, if they leave the ladder unattended, hey, who's in charge here? I'm getting preempted by my own daughter. But if they leave the ladder unguarded, maybe it is possible for one of us to take it up to heaven. Wouldn't that be great if there was a way to get from earth to heaven? Wouldn't it be great if there was a ladder or an escalator or an elevator or a direct flight or something that could take us to heaven?